Okay. So I decided to write a story about my brother and sister. It's called My Life with Peter and Wendy, an account of my siblings' lives with Angelman syndrome by Matthew Wilson. This is a story that I don't often tell, and it is always difficult putting into words. In life there are certain moments that define everything that occurs after. Such a moment arrived when I was 3 years old, and the first building blocks of my future self were set forever in place. You see, my story is tied to that of another. I can be but a mere narrator of the events as they unfolded, and I promise to hold as much truth as my recollection and that of others allows. When I was 3 years old, my brother Zachary was born. My brother was a sickly infant, if there ever was one. He was born the color of blueberries, which my young self found strange if not alarming, and was prone to bouts of sickness. My parents could not comprehend what was wrong, neither could the many doctors. It was during this time that my parents began a quest for truth, and my brother started his early bouts with hospitals. My parents went to many doctors over the next few years. Each had their own opinions and verdicts. Your baby boy will surely never see the age of 5, much less the trials and frivolities of adulthood, one doctor swore with dead certainty. Another of equal sureness, your son has Down syndrome. And so the guessing game of diseases and syndromes, and the amount of allotted time God had graced my brother with, continued for the next few years. My brother, new to this world, was poked and prodded with needles and with different tests. You better prepare yourselves, warned a smart, educated fellow. How can you prepare or even comprehend that your son, your brother, your family is going to die? This was the question the good doctor expected my parents to face and accept. Quite frankly, they couldn't and refused to believe such a unhappy diagnosis. After countless searches of hope and even more failure, my parents finally arrived at the diagnosis of truth. A doctor told my parents that Zachary showed the symptoms of Angelman syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that is caused by the deletion of the 15th chromosome. A syndrome first discovered by Dr. Harry Angelman has no cure. The full extent of current medical knowledge allows only for the treatment of underlying symptoms associated with it. After years of searching and wondering, we have finally arrived at the beginning of my brother's and my journey. Not the end, as many good doctors had tried to assure us in the past. There is no doomsday clock hovering above my brother's head any more than there was over the rest of ours. My brother was the same as he had always been. He just had a different starting place than the rest of us. The memories faint, but I remember deciding that it didn't really matter if I could throw a baseball or play a video game with him. He was my brother, the same one I had wanted at the lonely age of 2. He was the same one the angel had delivered down by the hand of God. I would adapt, we all would. Our sense of normalcy, my sense of normalcy, was only ever threatened by those looking in, not us looking out. Angelman syndrome causes developmental delays such as slowed progression in the walking department and an inability to verbally speak. Laughter is also a major characteristic of Angelman syndrome, and they will laugh as if every moment of life brought them some grand amusement of the world. Looking back, I realized how much that laughter carried me over the years. Taylor was born after Zachary, and the Lord saw fit to give her the same laughter and amusement that filled my brother. She was more of a roamer than my brother, and was always getting into stuff that she shouldn't. She hated sleep more than anything in the world, and it wasn't uncommon to see her coming from bed just as soon as you put her down. She learned a little sign language to express herself, which my brother didn't really care much for, preferring to remain an enigma. As the years went by and things changed, and I changed, Zachary and Kayla remained indifferent. I used to think of them as Wendy and Peter Pan, two souls forever in the blissfulness of youth and innocence. They'd never hurt a soul if they could help it, and certainty never meant any harm. It's just sometimes they get frustrated when we don't understand. How I wish I could read minds and pluck out their every woes. Their strength grew as they got older. You'd never really understand a person's life unless you lived it. So I guess you won't ever truly understand the joys and sorrows accompanied with raising my brother and sister. Public schools may seem horrible to some, but in my experience, they are 100 times worse for the multi-needs. My brother and sister arrived home from school with fresh bruises and long past soiled pants. The special needs class was a small segregated building, separated from the normal children. They were the forgotten ones, swept under the rug because they thought no one cared. Well, my parents surely enough did. They took notice of every bruise and every scratch. They discovered the truth piece by piece. What they found out was even more horrible than what they could have imagined. One spring day, my mother decided to come by the school early. I remember overhearing her tell my grandmother every detail. She wanted to catch them off guard and by surprise. She showed up one day about 20 minutes before school let out. She marched across the long sidewalk barrier separating the room from the rest of the school. My mother tried the door, but it was locked. The few windows to the building had been completely blackened by a dark sheet of construction paper. Nothing ever good comes from darkened windows. She could hear shuffling inside. She stood her ground knocking on the door until someone answered. She forced her way through the cracked door and into the darkened classroom. There was my sister Kayla at the table, but where was Zachary? She looked around for my brother, noticing the startled faces of the teachers and aides. He wasn't on the beanbag chair or at the table. He wasn't anywhere to be found. Light struck two orbs piercing out from the shadows of the toy shelf. With horror, my mother realized those orbs were Zachary's eyes. The teachers had imprisoned him in a makeshift cage, blocking him in with a desk. They treated him worse than a dog should be treated. It's boundless. The amount of cruelty someone will inflict on another human being. How can you treat someone so innocent that way? My parents took my siblings out of the school system. The principal was of little use on the matter. The only possible solution was to hire a lawyer in an attempt to sue the school. It was all eventually settled, as my siblings were the first priority on my parents' mind. It was justice they were after, not a certain amount of repayment that seems to be the cause of many trials. Some of the teachers got fired, and a few I seem to recall didn't. The school's reputation was forever tarnished in my mind. As a result of the trial, my sister Kayla was granted a spot on the waiting list and later accepted into the Learning Tree program in Mobile, Alabama. It was a program designed to help and teach children and teens. As a result, she went to stay in Mobile and away from home. We visit her all the time, but on nights when she's always away, I used to like to think she went off to Neverland. I know, it seems silly, but it helps me drift to sleep sometimes. And it was always the staring that got to my mother. Whenever we go out somewhere, people always stopped and stared at my brother or sister. Some of it was out of pity, but for most it was just curiosity. My siblings had never needed anyone's pity, nor do they deserve any hate. They deserve to live in a world free from persecution, but that can never happen unless someone cares enough to stand up. I think that I can be that someone. I believe that someone can be you. When my brother was 10, he had a bad seizure. My mother screamed out in the night, begging for him to snap out of it. It's not the kind of thing that easily leaves your mind. We took him to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't wake him up or snap him out of it. The only option left was to put him in a medically induced coma. I visited him once during the 3 days that he was unconscious. I remember how helpless he looked with all those wires and tubes connected to him. How could anybody hurt him? How could a complete stranger look down upon him with those judgmental eyes? The next memory I have is of him coming home laughing and tugging at his 9-year-old blanket. That laughter carries into the next, and so on. No matter what life throws at him, he always finds a way to laugh, and I can always count on that childish, pure laughter. It's been the driving force in my life. It's the reason I throw myself into whatever I do. I wonder what they would do if the roles were reversed. It's only by a small percentage that I am who I am. Look at how much they've accomplished in their short lives. It's one of the reasons it makes me so mad when people say they're too busy to help, or they simply don't care about this group of people. They don't hear the laughter. They don't see the smiles. They don't know the joy. My brother Zachary will be at Robertsdale High this year. I hope you will drop by sometime and make him feel welcome. So, that's my story, my brother's story. I hope you liked it.